No problem. Well, welcome to the keynote today, and I welcome everyone participating this Saturday morning or afternoon. So I wanted to just do the keynote. We also have a great webinar presentation from Dr. Sten. And so I wanted to do a 15-minute segment about how everyone should ask themselves whether or not the PMF will help with their particular condition that they're looking for, or whether or how it will help with their expectations. So I wanted to get into that because technically we are really not, we're focused on health. We're not focused on disease or illness or any diagnosis. And I'm going to explain that to you and explain why. But we really are focused on health, and it's everyone's responsibility to know your biometrics, to know your numbers, your vital signs, and to work your health or manage your health and lead a healthy lifestyle, particularly in the age of the pandemic. You really need to know your biometrics and how you can move them to positive baseline numbers. Because what we're seeing in this environment is that biometrics such as temperature and SpO2 and blood pressure, all of these biometrics all constitutes how well your body is functioning and overall indicators of a healthy lifestyle. So I wanted to set that perspective out here and then allow us all to go into what we need to know as the foundations. And I've presented this before, but I wanted to do it again because really, if you can focus on this slide here and really understand it, you will understand how to apply pulse electromagnetic fields, particularly magnetic resonance stimulation, and how that relates to the functioning of your body and the improvements. And I always say physics mediates chemistry, which activates biology. And the particular physics we're using here is we're using magnetic field parameters. And these magnetic field parameters are constructed in order to follow Faraday's law of induction and the principle of resonance. So those is the physics that we are using to modify chemistry. And the chemistry which we are focused on potentially modifying is resulting in improved transport of charges, which induce electrical currents within inside of the body. So we're using physics to modify chemistry in order to get the mechanism of action, which is the transport of charges, which may induce electrical currents within inside the body. And then the positive benefits is transmembrane voltage potentials, cellular function, and overall system coherence. So I wanted to add in a particular quote, and it is from Mark Markov, and he had written a great book about electromagnetic fields. And the centuries of development of natural sciences provide enough evidence to claim life is an electromagnetic event. And biomagnetism is an area of science that deals with magnetic fields that are generated by biological systems. And magnetobiology is the studies the effects of exogenous magnetic fields when applied to biological objects. And pulse electromagnetic fields are physical stimulus that affect biological systems through the generation of coherence or interfering fields that modify fundamental electromagnetic frequencies generated by living organisms. Some could refer to this as the human biofield. So physics is the intended use of the IMRS prime, the Omnium 1 2.0, particularly the whole body mass. So the intended use is to generate specific magnetic field parameters which increase the probability of modifying the ionic flow. Chemistry is the mechanism of action that is induced. So we're moving ionic movement with the result of inducing electrical currents in the body. And the The benefits to biology is, of course, voltage, cell membrane potentials. And any benefit that is experienced by pulsed electromagnetic fields, particularly magnetic resonance stimulation, is due to the fact of we are inducing voltage. And I will go on and further explain why this is such. So the magnetic field parameters that are generated outside a body can be viewed as exogenous fields, and the magnetic field parameters that interact with the body's natural endogenous magnetic fields. So the body's natural endogenous magnetic fields are created from the movement of electrical charges, which in turn generates electrical currents and magnetic fields within the tissues. Since all potentials are controlled by charge, they can therefore be influenced by various specified magnetic field parameters. And this is the whole reason, the intent of use of the IMRS Prime and the Omnium One 2.0 whole body mats, pillow pads, and spot applicators. It's all about moving charges, creating ionic movement. And what's great about magnetic resonance stimulation is that it obeys the first rule, which is do no harm. And the reason why it does no harm is because magnetic resonance stimulation uses specified magnetic field parameters as a transport medium. And these magnetic field parameters pass through the biological tissues unhindered. And this may result in inducing deep charges in the body. And because the magnetic resonance stimulation, the PEMF, induces a physiological ionic movement in tissue, they can only produce as much charge as the biological organism is naturally capable of. So you are not able to overcharge your body or harm yourself by utilizing an excessive amount of magnetic resonance stimulation. It will act just like your cell phone. Once your cell phone's at 100, keeping it on the charger is basically just a waste of electricity. And that's how Wolfgang always talks about it. Really, any more than 24 minutes on a whole body mat is just a waste of electricity because your body will not charge past its natural conditioning. And because we are using the principle of resonance, we are not forcing the body to do this. And that is why it is a class 1 PMF device, and there is a low risk to the user, and they are targeted for particularly home use in almost every single individual, unless you have one of the contraindications: pregnancy, epilepsy, or electrical implants. So that's huge, and that really helps you dictate how much intensity or how much time and duration. You really do not need to go over 24 minutes. If you really want to utilize the device in the best manner, you would do multiple sessions of, say, 16 minutes throughout the day on the whole body mat, because one application of 48 minutes does not do you any more benefit. You would actually get more benefit by doing 3 16-minute sessions throughout the day. So keep that in mind. More time on the whole body mat is not more beneficial to the body. It's better to do smaller amounts throughout the day and on a consistent daily, weekly basis in order to get the best benefits. Because with magnetic resonance stimulation, you have the time-weighted average of magnetic field exposure. So the more consistently you do it, the more benefits that you will see. And the 2 laws which I spoke about, which is utilized in the magnetic field parameters, is Faraday's law of induction. And this principle is used to increase the probability of ionic movement, which is separating charges within inside the body. And this action may improve membrane voltage potentials. And the principle of resonance is a concept that is used to synchronize coherence within the body It's also referred to as establishing frequency resonance inside the body. And just on a side note, they have done studies and have found that people who are depressed have low coherence compared to healthy individuals. So there is a link between your body's frequency resonance, your coherence, and mood alterations, such as this research which presented depression. And as we always say, all diseases are eventually the outcome of damaged cellular function. And this is really what we're focused on and we're working on. We're working on improving cellular function, since we know that all diseases are eventually the outcome of damaged cellular function. So how, by leading a healthy lifestyle, utilizing PMF, can we mitigate damaged cellular function? And that is where voltage comes in. A sound cell works at a voltage between 70 to about 110 millivolts to deliver ATP particles, which is the energy of the cell, which are crucial for a healthy body. When a cell gets damaged, the voltage ranges between 40 to 50 millivolts, and this much voltage is not enough to produce ATP, and hence the cell loses energy. And you can see on the left-hand side, the graph, what happens to a cell once it drops below 50 millivolts. It can be considered in a danger zone. And in order to improve cell membrane function and stimulate ATP production, the body, the transporters, they move ions against the concentration gradient using energy such as ATP. So the body is creating this inequality by moving ions around in order to stimulate cell function. And this is the same mechanism of action that PMF is doing. PMF is separating charges, creating inequality in order to stimulate cell functioning, because separating charges is the key to life. The unequal distribution of just a few key ions between the intra and extracellular fluid and the selective movement through the plasma membrane governs the electrical properties of the cell. So this energy, which can be stored, and it then can use to drive cell growth, cell repair, cell replacement, and cell reproduction. And what is important is that the magnetic field parameters interact with the tissues that occur with the separation of charges, and they result in electrical currents being generated in magnetic fields. And this is all done by mitigating ions, by separating charges. And when you improve the cell membrane function, you improve the voltage, you are actually helping mitigate any cellular functions that may be diminished due to a diseased condition. And this is why when you look on MedPub or Google Scholar, it seems like PMF helps everything, and it does, because it is working on the cellular level and not on any disease or illness condition with magnetic resonance stimulation. And this is also why when you read a lot of research, you get conflicting results, because they are not targeting a specific diseased state. They are targeting cellular function that could be inhibited due to poor voltage, poor cell membrane potentials. And that is the key in how you would always look at everything, and why when people ask about all these different diseases and illnesses, I say it doesn't do anything with the particular disease and illness. What it is doing is mitigating any issues from cellular dysfunction. And living in the age of a pandemic, when we're surrounded with sedentary quarantines and lack of parks and beaches and gyms being open, we are falling into sedentary lifestyle complications, which may lead to losses of function. And how can we mitigate this and mitigate any contributing factors cellular dysfunction could have in regards to chronic disease management or preventing anything escalating further? This whole process is not something that nature also doesn't take advantage of. And as a naturopath, I always say, if you have a problem, look to nature, because nature has already solved it. And who created nature? This picture depicts, on the upper left-hand corner, is the Hilton Fort Lauderdale Beach Resort. And what the Hilton did was it put wind turbines on the top of its roof, because it is harvesting the wind that is coming from the ocean in order to generate electricity for the hotel. And the inequality in air pressure creates movement, which turns the turbines. So you can think of the inequality the pulsed electromagnetic wave creates with inside of the body, moves the ions, which in turn turns the cell's machinery. It turns the cell's function. So we're basically utilizing the same concept. So by expanding energy and creating artificial inequality, in the case of the body, it pumps ions to where they don't want to be, and then harvest and stores this energy as the system returns to equilibrium. So basically, the body pushes ions to where they don't want to be in order to create inequality. And when the system tries to put itself back together, it harvests the energy that is created by the electrical currents that are coming. And if anyone is familiar with Dr. Jerry Tennant, he had discussed this concept as well too. To repair and heal cells, they needed an environment of -50 millivolts. Inadequate voltage is a characteristic of all chronic disease. Either you do not have the necessary voltage to run the cell, or the higher voltage needed to make new cells. You need double the normal voltage to repair or replace damaged cells. And the example that Dr. Tennant stated is that the reason people get macular degeneration is that they lose the -50 millivolts they need to make new cells every 48 hours inside of the eye. And those cells wear out and they don't get replaced. You need to give your body all of the material needed to replace those macular cells. And so when you think about that, that is what we are doing. We are not treating any type of degenerative disease. We are treating the voltage potentials that are required in order to replace and renew cells in order so that they do not fall into a state of dysfunction. And going back to the weather, we see this all around us. So as the wind blows from areas of high pressure to those of low pressure, the winds are a manifestation of inequalities in pressures in the system and the natural tendency to smooth the differences out. So the wind is generally on a rudimentary level created because the high pressures and the low pressures try to balance each other's out and go back to a state of equilibrium. And in doing so, it creates the wind, the energy, which drives the turbines, which drives the functioning of the hotel. We're using a pulse magnetic field to create inequality in order to create energy and improve cellular function in order to run the body. So it is all related, and it is all utilizing natural principles of physics in order to improve the body. You also need all the necessary raw materials like nutrients required to make new cells. You need to address any toxins and that might be damaging cells. So PMF is an adjunctive therapy. You still need exercise. You still need healthy nutrition. PMF is not making sodium. PMF is not putting oxygen into your body. You still need to do all of this because it's a part of a healthy lifestyle, and that is what we're all living in now. We're not going to be flying on planes and eating out at all the restaurants anymore. We're going to have a completely different life, and it is going to be a life focused on maintaining health. All of this is accomplished with the whole body mat, whether it's the IMRS Prime or the Omnium One 2.0. because of a triple sawtooth waveform. So the principle of physics, where we're using magnetic field parameters, Faraday's law of induction, and the principle of resonance, is all accomplished through complex wave formations. And as you can see on the top picture here, a triple sawtooth is created by the summation of a whole bunch of sine waves. And sine waves are individual frequencies. So when you put all of these sine waves together, you're generating multiple frequency spectrums that are being delivered. And the efficiency of a PMF device is also dependent on the frequencies and the waveforms that are utilized. So when you're comparing PMF devices or comparing any device, you need to ask yourself, what is the waveform and what are the frequencies being utilized? That's the first question when comparing devices. And when a time-varying pulsed electromagnetic field is generated with complex waveforms and frequency spectrums, these magnetic field parameters can be utilized as adjunctive treatments and have been shown to improve conditions and increase healing times. So when you compare a waveform with a lower rate of change, it does not deliver a sufficient current in the tissue. And one of the best and most beneficial waveforms is the sawtooth. The sawtooth waveform is produced by your brain. The sawtooth waveform is produced by your olfactory nerve in your nose, which, interesting enough, is also inhibited due to viruses. And the IMRS system creates these sawtooth waveforms by generating two pulse trains of various frequencies and amplitudes. The system then adds another harmonic frequency to the original pulse train, resulting in a change to the summated wave. And that is what you can see is how it begins to create a sawtooth formation out of the sine wave formation. The IMRS systems then continue to add harmonic frequencies to the ninth harmonic, thus achieving a nearly perfect sawtooth waveform with the desired rapid rise and sharp fall times. And creating a broad spectrum of frequencies increases the probability of frequency resonance and ionic modulation. So they are using the law of induction and principle of resonance in order to utilize it to modify ionic flow and induce currents in the body. And all of this is creating the induction in the body's tissue. And so when you move these charges is what creates the cellular voltage. So a best practice every morning, because also what they're finding is that when we sleep, our body begins to frequency decouple. And when we wake up, our body needs to couple itself, put itself back into coherence again. And that's why it is very important in the morning to do stretches, to do mindfulness work, to prepare yourself for the day, because you are still putting your body back into a state of coherence from your time spent sleeping. They're also contributing this to the possibility of one of the factors that cause strokes more frequently in the morning versus at other times of day, because the body is decoupled. What else voltage does is it helps with blood viscosity. And blood viscosity is the intrinsic resistance to flow. And so that has a physical measure called the shear rate, and that is defined as the ratio of velocity difference between 2 points divided by the difference of those 2 points. So in low shear conditions, the tendency of red blood cells to aggregate becomes more prominent. This is the rouleau formation that we talk about on the bottom left-hand corner, which causes exponential increase of viscosity and decreases shear rates. So it is all created due to poor shear conditions. And blood viscosity has an important influence on tissue perfusion, because a rise in an increase in viscosity may decrease tissue perfusion, which is oxygenation, nutrients deliver. And so this is one of the baselines we can measure, SpO2. Several studies have shown a linkage between whole blood viscosity and the hemodynamics of hypertension. And if anyone has been paying attention to the news, there was just a report out of New York that every single death with the coronavirus in New York, the patient had hypertension, high blood pressure. So what can we do to live a healthy lifestyle in the age of a pandemic? We can monitor our blood pressure and do acts that improve our blood pressure or maintain our healthy blood pressure ranges. We know people are measuring SpO2, which is the oxygenation of the tissues, because we know viruses love anaerobic conditions which lack oxygen. So if the body's oxygen saturation begins to low, we are now able to catch that early on. So if you have a whole week of data and all of a sudden it starts to change, that could be a sign that maybe you should reach out to your healthcare professional. Also important with blood viscosity is circadian variation, the circadian rhythms, which correlates with the change in hemocratic during the day. And hematocratic is basically the volume of red blood cells that are in the fluid. And during the day, this changes, and then the circadian variations change your plasma protein levels, all based on the time of day, depending on what rhythms your body is producing. And guess what? The whole body mats with all our devices incorporate organ clocks and circadian rhythm influences on the magnetic field parameters being delivered into the body. The circadian rhythm may also explain the increased incidence also in strokes in the morning. So blood viscosity plays an important role in pathophysiology of vascular diseases as a determining factor of global cardiovascular load and a factor affecting regional tissue perfusion. So we are not working on any type of cardiovascular diseases. What we are working on is conditions that contribute to poor health because of low shear conditions. And microcirculation, all of these things are improved because we are improving shear conditions within inside of the body. High blood viscosity also correlates with inflammation, systematic inflammation. And an important contributor to increased viscosity is the amount of red blood cells volume, a higher level of inflammatory proteins, and the loss of your red blood cells flexibility. And that is because your blood cells begin to lose voltage, lose power, they lose their positive charge, and they begin clumping together, again, in that Rouleau effect. So when you increase the voltage, your red blood cells begin to plump up again. And what we know is that like charges repel like charges. So the cell membranes, which all have the same charges, repel each other. But when they lose voltage, the force diminishes, and that's when they begin or may begin clumping together. So just by separating charges and charging your red blood cells, you're improving conditions which could lead to hypertension, systematic inflammation, poor tissue perfusion, oxygen that's in the tissues. That could lead to anaerobic conditions, which make prime environments for such things as viruses, cell dysfunction. So all of this is what is the mechanism of action when you improve the voltage potentials within inside of the body. And I'm going to do real quick, because some of these I'm going to review again on the 7 p.m. webinar. So I just want to go through the next ones real quick. But we're going to go into sedentary lifestyle conditions and how all of this is a contributing factor. Also, thank you for people who keep reminding me to mention water, because hydration is hugely important. What we know is that most fluids in the body are actually electrolytes, and those are ions dissolved in liquid. And the fluids in the extracellular space, which carry current by charged ions, are sodium, potassium, and calcium. all that have been contributing to the beneficial actions of pulsed electromagnetic fields. And I'm just going to touch on this real quick, but structured water holds and delivers energy. This negatively charged water is found in your cells and extracellular tissue. And the way you recharge this structured water is through sunlight. Sun exposure structures water in your body, which provides greater energy. This also will relate to far infrared, and we'll get into that later. But remember, the best practice on a whole body mat is hydrate, do the body mat, and then do some type of stretches. Whether that be just regular stretches you learned in gym class, or whether that's actually yoga or Pilates, or whether it's just a series of stretches that you like to do because it makes you feel good. But the best practice with a whole body mat is you do not need more than 24 minutes. You should be hydrated before you get on that. And then afterwards, you should do some type of stretching. I also wanted to bring up that there is so much talk now about telehealth and how it's going to create a different healthcare system after the virus. And this was an article with the Humana CEO. And the one thing I just wanted to point out, and we're going to talk about this more this evening, is that more healthcare services are being performed in the home going forward. So patients don't necessarily need to go into the hospital. And this is exactly where we come in here at Swiss Bionics. We are not dealing with disease, illness, or diagnosis. We are dealing with improving the cell membrane functions with voltage and improving the overall functioning of the body's vital signs, the biometrics, blood pressure, heart rate variability, heart rate, SpO2, temperature. All of these things, once they begin to fail or move into warning areas, show us that the body is entering into a state of disease or illness. And if we can catch all of this stuff early on enough, it can all be mitigated with exercise, with nutrition, and with complementary adjunctive medical equipment. And this will all be done within the home. So I wanted to now turn it over to Dr. Sten. And so I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to, and I see he is muted, so let me unmute it. And okay. Okay, I think you're on, Dr. Sten.
I think we're set. How's that?
I think it's good.
Great, great. Great job, Dr. Greg. It's an honor to follow up on that type of presentation, and I hope I can match its quality. So thank you very much for the intro. Welcome, everybody.
Call me Dr. Greg.
Yeah. But everybody
first, and don't call me if you have a heart attack.
Yeah, true. Yeah, me either. With everybody, thank you for coming on a Saturday. It's great to have you here. To get right to what I'm going to be talking about, let me get my presentation up on here. And so when we get up to the actual subject of what I'm talking about, everybody, is the brain entrainment, or training the brain in different ways. Brain entrainment, for the definition of, refers to the brain's electrical response to rhythmic stimulation. And that's the cool thing about it. When we talk about rhythmic stimulation in this context, we're talking about, for example, light pulses or rhythm pulses of sound. When it comes to when the brain is given a stimulus, as in the second point, that brain reacts to that stimulus. And the way it reacts to that stimulus is trying to match or correspond that stimulus to really protect the body or improve our health. When we talk about when our brain is subjected to a constant rhythm, for example, it tries to match that rhythm where the brain isn't trained or exists. In a later slide, I'm going to talk about different examples in nature, but it's fun to hit on this now. When we think about ocean and waters and fish, my mouse is I'm getting technical help from my IT specialist here. One second, everybody. Thank you. Okay, great. So here we go, back to it. Sorry about that, everyone. So when we get up to like the oceans and the fish, it's really interesting that you see the fish without even thinking about it swim in a rhythm or in a pattern. When we listen to music, how we unconsciously tap our fingers or our feet or even sway back and forth to that rhythm, that's all an example of this, a response that the brain has to outside stimulus, especially rhythmic stimulus. Brain waves. Now, a lot of you have possibly taught or possibly heard about brain waves, so I'm just going to briefly go over them without getting too in depth. But these brain waves are actually produced in our cortex. And for best health, they really need to be in balance or coordination with each other. Beta, alpha, theta, delta, and the newest one, gamma. So really beta, normal waking consciousness. Alpha, awake but deeply relaxed. Theta, light sleep, dreaming. And the last delta, which is more of the main four, the gamma is just more of a random, at least as far as my talk goes. The delta, which is the deep dreamless sleep. So for example, if you look at these and you look at a person that might be unbalanced, for example, too many delta waves or too many theta waves, they're not going to have normal energy for life, correct? So if we throw in diagnoses, we can put in, you know, fibromyalgia or the depressions or different types of functions in the body where it's not producing at its normal rate, but it's actually producing under its energy. And if you think about being overwhelmed with delta, in other words, you're just sleepy all the time, those delta waves are going to make you more sleepy and in a dreamless state, kind of like Eeyore when it comes to Winnie the Pooh. So I would assume the PEMF would have been great for Eeyore to get over his depressive state, if you see where I'm coming from, to get to a more energetic state. PEMF in the brain and the way it works with some diseases. Now, I want to reiterate just from what we were hearing from the prior presentation with Greg, was that we're looking at optimizing our response to our health. In other words, optimizing our healthy state. When we do that, we can use different modalities like PEMF, like chiropractic, acupuncture, different modalities that have been around for centuries to enhance our health naturally to create optimal health or optimal homeostasis. So me as a chiropractor, nutritionist, my colleagues as acupuncturists, and etc. And now with us, with our PEMF family, realizing again, we're not treating diseases, we're just optimizing health. But when we optimize health, like the examples here, some cool things are actually treated and improved as far as their function. So when improving health, we have seen ADHD, stroke patients, Alzheimer's, depression, all of those have been clinically and scientifically shown in laboratories and studies to actually improve the function of these patients. What they do is that works in balancing the brain waves. So as you can assume, in ADHD, autisms, or that spectrum, stroke patients where the brain has actually been damaged, et cetera, those brain waves are not normal, correct? And so what PEMF does is actually helps normalize some of the deficient brain waves or maybe some of the overactive brain waves. And it creates the body or puts the body to a more homeostatic state. When we get out of the PEMF, and one of the things I wanted to really more concentrate on, and this is one of the devices with the Swiss Bionics and the Omnium and the IMRS that I got really excited about, is the Omni Brain. So before describing the Omni Brain, getting into the principles of healing, sound, and light. Now realize, everybody, these natural therapies of chiropractic, acupuncture, etc., naturopaths, they've been around for centuries, but so has sound and light even before that. Sound and light has been used from ancient civilizations for different healings, different processes they needed to get ready for, etc., etc. In this page here, without reading every word by word, but again, in that bold is that rhythmic pattern, the rhythmic stimuli, the rhythmic sound and light is actually what is used to entrain or balance the brain. And so when we think about these different beats and therapies, as we'll talk about, there's binaural beats, mononaural beats, isochronic tones, etc. Those actually, before technology and computers came around, were actually used by like Tibetan monks in the Tibetan meditation bowls, if you guys are familiar with that, tuning forks, etc., etc. They've been using sound rhythmic resonances for centuries now, and now we're able to deliver it to all of us via an iPad and the great technologies from Swiss Bionics. As I said at the beginning, some of nature's ways of coordinating the brain with surrounding rhythms is the fish in the ocean, your circadian rhythm synchronizing to the rise and fall of the sun, like your body's alarm clock is what some people call it. As a male, women and living and working closely, naturally matching their menstrual cycles. This has always been fascinating to me. Breathing patterns and heart rates of couples matching when being closer. This is also interesting being a chiropractor, as I know husband and wives, when they come in, they have the same misalignments in their body, which is really interesting. The OmniBrain. Now, this is a picture of the OmniBrain. I assume people who have the mat have seen this. The people who have not owned the OmniBrain or the OmniMat or the IMRS, this is what the OmniBrain looks like. It has those earbuds, and inside of the flip side of what you're looking at are two visual ports or light chambers that actually have red, green, or blue tendencies or visual lights. So when we look at the lights and the different type of therapies and colors, we look at the different colors, and I'm going to try and pull off showing you guys actual colors of what these are. So give me a second here. All right, can everybody see the colors? I hope so. Great. So when we look at this here, we'll look at the red, the orange, the yellows, the greens. These are all different hues of lights that can be achieved by the IMSR system or the OmniBrain. If we're looking at these different light spectrums, we can read briefly. Red is hot, initiating, it's stimulating energy. Orange, happiness, warmth. Yellow, mental activity, learning. Green is actually on the opposite side, cooling, sedative. Just like when we look at blue, calming, deep, restful. So these are really great fun examples of different color fields that are actually emitted by the OmniBrain that can help us with our health goals. So when we have this OmniBrain going, and at the very end of the keynote here, I'm going to try and actually do on screen an example of the OmniBrain and how it looks, so you guys can actually see how it functions along with the iPad function. But to understand the beats, and here's just different definitions that you guys can read through it, and I'll just hit on the different points. But binaural, monaural, and isochronic tones, these are what the Swiss Bionic Company has put in to the OmniBrain to help us balance our brain function or improve better brain entrainment. Now, these beats, they come to our cortex and they actually excite our pyramidal cells. The pyramidal cells are like our circuit breaker in our brain. The cortex creates the message, it sends the message down to the body. But before the message is sent down to the body, it has to go through the circuit breaker or brain stem, pyramidal cells, etc. So if we can best enhance and balance that brainstem and pyramidal cells, it'll send messages to our body and the body returning back to our brain much more efficiently. Now these beats, the binaural means more than one, monaural means more or just one, and so does isochronic. But when you match them together, you create, like the paragraph above, two different tones that are played at the same time that actually stimulate our brain waves. And that's the thing to take from this. Remember from the beginning, I was talking about rhythmic stimuli, not random stimuli. When you listen to these binaural beats, and you could actually go online and do on Google and YouTube and actually listen to binaural and all these isochronic tones. So you can actually sample these anytime you guys want to actually go on the computers and your phones and look at what these beats and sounds actually sound like. But when the body gets in touch with that rhythmic wah, 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 wah sound, for example, it actually creates and stimulates certain brain waves in our brain, creating more relaxation, more energy for the day, et cetera, et cetera. So when we're using the OmniBrain, some of the main uses and keys that we start with, and the same thing are the rules as far as my understanding with the OmniMat and the IMRS, when you're using the whole body mat, we start with low intensity first. And when it comes to the color, obviously there's going to be a brightness setting. And hopefully I'll be able to show you guys all this here in just a little bit. Know your colors. Know what each color does. For example, red. Red is excitatory, as we saw in that example, just the last slide or two. Using too much red can also cause anxiety. Using too much blue can cause too much relaxation. So I would not use a lot of blue before this presentation or before going on a workout. So know your colors. We use once a day, at least once a day for about 10 minutes is usually sufficient enough. Use it with your PEMF mat, with the OmniMat or IMRS. You'll get much more of an overall health balancing and homeostatic effect if you use both the PEMF and the OmniBrain. Use sounds that come with the OmniBrain. Now, this OmniBrain has the binaural beats and the other tones actually pre-programmed into it, so you don't have to do anything besides push start. You can actually download music, which takes a little more of a sound card, and you can put your own, like Mozart has been highly used for brain reentracement. Brahms, Beethoven, the classical music spectrum has been highly used for the autism, the ADHDs. And actually, I remember using these classical studies in medical school, helping me study. And I remember being able to study for so much longer with listening to Mozart and Beethoven, those classical musics. So they actually increase that certain brain wave that help us study and learn. So with this last slide here, just personal information. As a thank you to everybody here, I wanted to say anybody to reach out. I'll definitely give time to reach out to you. The first 10, we can actually set up a free consultation. I do telehealth, as Greg was saying in his last slide. Even though I'm here in Southern California, I can help others that are not in California, either east side, southern states, it doesn't matter. Through consultations and through remote muscle testing, that's how I work. I work through chiropractic, but with nutrition is the main aspect of how I do the telehealth. And as we know, the PEMF mat actually helps deliver more nutrition. And I find better results in my clinic with people using the mat and receiving nutrition as well. And as a fun thing, just to promote our life and health styles as we're all locked inside, my father is actually a master Pilates instructor. Here's some YouTube exercises for everybody. Go to Lifestyle Warrior John Kerwin on YouTube, and you'll get 8 free, we say 8 so far, 20-minute videos of Pilates workouts that you could do on your living room floor. So if I can go back to our actual Zoom call here, if I could figure out how to do it. There we go. Can everybody see me? Yeah, all right. So here's my OmniBrain. Here's the sound buds that come with it. When I flip it around, you can see the 2 light ports that actually emit the light. Now, if I can get my pad going here, and I'll put the OmniBrain on, you can see how we can customize the different light fields to what our demands might be. Sorry for the reflection of the lights, but you can see the red, the green, the blue, and the brightness colors. You can actually change these different tones to actually make a change in the overall color of what is being delivered through the visual buds. And so if I go ahead and just go ahead and push start on here, I will show you how it actually goes through and starts flashing if it'll work for me. Actually, I need it attached to the pad here, so I didn't set it up correctly. But I wanted to actually show you guys how you can customize the red, green, and blue fields to create those many visual spectrums that we saw between orange, violet, yellow, because as you see here, only the primary colors, red, green, and blue. So what we have to do is change up like the red and the blue to make a different color, and just a little bit of artistic flair or artistic knowledge to actually see what is actually happening in the lights. On the text thread here in the chat thread is a great question of saying, when you use the Omni Brain, do you use eyes open or closed? Keep them closed. You do not need to keep them open for any reason. It actually has a better effect, and it's not as stimulating with your eyes open. If you lay, for example, with the Omni Brain on you with your eyes open for 10 minutes, you're going to be blind as a bat when you get up, first of all, because you'll be so colorblind from all the flashing lights. So the best application and everything is actually keep your eyes closed. With the volume, it's the same thing with the intensity of the brightness. The brightness is way down here. The volume control is up top here. You start with the volume of the beats on a low volume as well. So everything we start with the matte, with the intensity of the brightness and the volume of the sound, we all start with low settings and increase as we can actually get healthier, as our body can actually take it. So that was actually the last part of what I wanted to do, is just actually show you the device of what we use in Swiss Bionics, being the Omni Brain, to actually achieve better brain entrainment. Remember, PEMF is a great adjunct for putting in better health, better function, for better homeostasis and optimal living. But this brain entrainment has really got me excited as a chiropractor. And honestly, this device of the Omni Brain is what led me towards Swiss Bionics and not the other companies. So this has been a great honor and great time for me to bring more awareness to the Omni Brain, because I don't think it is used enough to really where we can get a lot more use out of our Swiss Bionics systems when we use the Omni Brain itself.
That was excellent, Dr. Sten, and you're absolutely right. People do not take full advantage of brainwave entrainment and the many benefits over decades of research that it shows. And I have some great articles I can't wait to get your feedback on in regards to how you use HRV to interpret the benefits of brainwave entrainment. So with our new IRMRS Prime, you're actually going to be able to correlate your muscle testing with heart rate variability to collaborate your therapeutic parameters.
Okay, this is Terry Willis. Can I speak? Great.
Yes, you are live, Terry.
That's great. Dr. Stan Curvin, I love him. His information is right there in the chat as well. He's a holistic chiropractor. He talked about that. His information, his office number, his email address right there in the chat. I am Terry Willis. I have personally gone to see him for years, and I personally recommend him to anyone who needs a consultation for any health issues you may have. If you're in the South Cal area, you can go to see him. If you're out of the area, you can do telehealth, and he did it for me as well. So he is good and very knowledgeable in both our IMRS and the Omnium One system. Now, but for anyone who are not a member yet and are interested in our PEMF device, please get back to the person who invited you to the webinar. That's all I have. Next, Pamela.
Excellent.
Great to hear from you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Pamela Marchand, and I am so excited to be here. And it is an honor. Dr. Stan and Greg and Terry Willis and Wolfgang, all of them, I feel so blessed to be a part of this and a part of Swiss Bionics today. Swiss Bionics Solutions and the PEMF mat, I use the Omnium One, and I've been using it for just about 3 years now, and it has really changed my life. And what I want to share with you a little bit about how I was before and how I am now. And what the bottom line is, it brought me back to vibrant health. And for those of you who are like me, I'm a super high sensitive. I grew up connecting with angels, being around the animal and the fairy kingdom, and just being wide open to energy. And I sensed and felt everything. And when I was young, my mother, thinking that she's doing the right thing, had me, take me to the dentist and all of that. In those days, they put in silver amalgam fillings. And by the time when I was older, in my 30s, I started realizing I had over 13 silver fillings. And at that point, I started getting, some weird symptoms. I didn't know what it was. I wasn't sure what was really going on in my body, but I sensed there was something. And I had decided at that point to remove the silver fillings. And after that, I really had mercury toxicity in my whole body. And what that caused was a storm of inflammation. And that is one of the major things that this PEMF has really helped me with. From pain in pretty much my whole body, and from all of that inflammation, my thyroid at one point was 0. It was so low that they couldn't believe I was alive. And so I thought, how am I going to detox this? And at the time, my body was so low that I couldn't. I needed to get my vibration up. I needed to get my body, bring it up, so I had enough energy to actually even release the toxins in my body. And by the grace of God, I was so fortunate to meet Terry and Wolfgang 3 years ago. And I had to start really slow because I'm very sensitive. And at the time I met them, I had recently started taking up salsa dancing. And again, I had hurt the back of my legs. They got very inflamed because my soft spot was always going back, or my weak spot was inflammation. And I got the mat. It was an Omnium 1, and I laid on it on sensitive. And the very first time I got off, and I felt the back of my legs, and I started to bend them back. And I was like, oh my God, I can bend my legs back. I can do yoga again. And I thought, well, maybe this is just temporary. This isn't going to work permanently. And lo and behold, I kept using it. And Terry kept telling me, consistency, go slow, and do sensitive. And so I kept doing that. And in that first 30 days, the inflammation behind my legs was gone. And at that point, I called Terry and I was like, I'm sold. I need to have this in my body. New energetically, for me, it had to be a process, gradual, slow. And I am really, this is really, going on the 3rd year, and I'm still learning so much. There is so much to learn about all of the energy work that we're doing, the vibrational medicine. I use the mat today on a daily basis, and I use every morning activation. Sometimes I'll do regeneration, and then I use it every evening. I love the sleep mode because it does bring me in a deep delta sleep. And during the day, if I need a quick pick me up, I go back on the mat, or if I just want to relax, I'll use relaxation. And one of the things that I really wanted to share with everyone is I was on a very, not a high dose, but I was on a low dose of thyroid medicine, and it was natural. It's called NatureThyroid due to the mercury toxicity. And when I'd go back to my endocrinologist, she would say to me, what are you doing? What are you doing? Your levels, you don't need all this medicine, you're balancing out. And I'd say, nothing. My diet, I'm gluten-free. I have a clean diet. I drink great water. And she says, well, you're doing something different. And finally it dawned on me. It was like the second time. She's like, what are you doing? You don't need all this. So we kept cutting back my medicine, and lo and behold, we found out again that it was the mat. It dawned on me, oh my gosh, it's the mat. And I finally put the 2 and 2 together. I was taking the medicine before going on the mat with drinking a full glass of water, and then drinking another full glass of water after the mat. And what we noticed is my vibration was not needing that as much, and I was actually balancing out my whole body and my energy field. And you guys, you wouldn't believe it. At one point in my life, I couldn't barely walk and talk. I was talking backwards, literally. And today, I'm, almost double the age, and I feel really great. And one last thing, this has to do with what we're all going through at this time in our lives, being exposed to all these new viruses and things in the world, radiation, toxins. And I was exposed to it as well. And funny, during the time, I kept staying on my mat. I wasn't feeling that well. And I thought, gosh, is this a virus? But we didn't know. It was in January. We didn't even know there was a coronavirus. So I kept using the mat. I called Terry. She told me what to do. And during that time, I wasn't feeling that great. I went to a Dr. Delgado, and he did my red cell blood analysis under a microscope. And I was like, oh no, don't tell me the results, because I'm not my usual self. And he said, Pamela, I don't know what you're doing, but even if you don't feel great, he said, your red blood cells are showing they're perfect. They're in harmony. They're not sticky. They're vibrating around. And I looked on the screen, and he said they looked really healthy. So that was a really great, testimony to me, to see inside of me what was working. And the last thing is, what I wanted to share is about Swiss Bionic Solutions. Is when I first met Wolfgang Jask, who is the CEO and inventor founder, I had gone up to him and I said, Wolfgang, I know for me that PEMF, in addition with far infrared, speeds up my healing, and it works so well. And I said, is there any way you can add far infrared into the mat? And he looked at me and he was like, well, I'm working on it, but it's not so easy. And I was like, please, please, please. And so I continued to use my mat with far infrared. And the blessing of all of that is here we are almost 3 years later, and Swiss Bionic Solutions has done it again. They added the far infrared. We now have this new PEMF Prime Hybrid, which we're so excited. I can't wait to use, and all of us. So I wanted to thank everyone for coming and spending your Saturday morning. Anyone has questions, I'm sure, Dr. Stan and Greg, Terry will be here to answer. And if I can assist in any way, I'm here. God bless you all. Stay well.
Thank you so much, Pam. And if people have questions, reach out to Pam too. She is a wealth of knowledge about many subjects, and obviously you can see why, because she takes her health seriously and finds the answers for herself, and finds the solutions for herself, and therefore possesses a great body of health and wellness knowledge. So I want to thank Pam and JD, and I want to thank Dr. Sten, and special thanks to Terry Willis for putting all of this together and getting us all connected. It's all happened because of Terry Willis. She's really running the streets, as her husband would say. So I want to thank everybody for coming on to the webinar this Saturday. We'll